The University of Maine system welcomes you to participate in an interactive college success series hosted by Chancellor Daniel Malloy and each of our presidents from Maine's public universities. In each episode, we will discuss a range of topics from paying for college, student expectations, successful transition, and much more. We'll even answer questions live from our Maine community audience. The presidential tour is streamed live every Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. Please visit values.maine.edu to view the schedule of upcoming episodes or watch past episodes.
My name's Dan Malloy. I'm the Chancellor of the University of Maine system. That's a collection of 7 universities, most with multiple locations spread throughout the state of Maine. It's a great pleasure to be in your home tonight, and I want to thank you for joining us. This is part of an effort of outreach to parents of high school students, to students who may have already applied and or haven't made up a decision. It's a cross-section of Mainers that we're seeking to bring along with us to make sure that they understand the possibilities of this system and make sure that they're well prepared to make decisions about where they want to spend a portion of their lives getting an education. It's an important effort that we're undertaking, and I want to thank you for being part of the first show that we're actually doing. It's going to be a little rough and we're going to make some mistakes, but honestly we're going to try to give you useful information that you can apply to the decisions that you'll have to make this year or some number of years in the future. Part of that is that we'll bring experts on fields, and later in today's broadcast we'll be talking about financial aid and how one accesses that. These are experts who will come up and join me in a little while. But one of the great things about being connected with an educational institution is the young people who come to that system. Michaela Roy, who sits next to me, is one of those very interesting folks. From a small town in Maine, a graduating class in high school of 37 people. She made the brave decision to come to our largest university, the University of Maine. She's had an unbelievable career while she was here. She decided to go to graduate school and is in that program, and she really is part of what I call the University of Maine family. So with that, Michaela, it's great to be with you. You and I have had the opportunity.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's good. It's great. Thanks for helping me out here.
Yes, of course.
But you've had a great career here. Why don't you tell folks a little bit about yourself? I think I had it right. It was a class of 37?
Yep, right around there.
Right around there?
Yep.
Close enough.
I'm from Howland, Maine, which is about 25 minutes north of Orono. I graduated from Penobscot Valley High School. Again, very small high school. I graduated with about 37 kids. I think my hometown probably has about 1,200 people, so it's a very small town, a very tight-knit community.
I think we could fit that in one of the dormitories.
You probably could and still have extra room. Yeah, very tight-knit community, a very typical small-town Maine. I'm very generationally small-town Maine. My parents are from East Millinocket.
So how did you become so brave?
Well, I wanted to break out a little bit. I was definitely searching for a new level of diversity. I loved my small high school, but I was really looking for a larger university to further my education, and the University of Maine was really the perfect fit.
So yeah, I mean, was it the right choice, and why was it? Give me a couple of, tell folks a couple of reasons why it was the right place for you.
Yeah, I like I said, I was looking for something different than my small high school. I was looking for a different diversity. However, I really had no intention at all of leaving Maine. It's home. I love Maine. I didn't want to leave. So the University of Maine was kind of number one on my list. I took a tour the summer before my senior year of high school. It was the one and only college tour I took. The University of Maine was the only college I applied to. So I put all of my eggs in one basket, but I think it was the right basket, and that's all that matters.
And so how were those 4 years?
They were good. College is challenging, without a doubt, but the University of Maine, although it is a larger school, it's still a great community. Every student, I think, is able to find their own little group just because there is so much diversity throughout the
So,
system.
Michaela, at some point while you were in school, you also had a sister who was in school. That
Yes.
puts a lot of financial pressure on
Yes.
families. Tell
Yep.
me a little bit about that.
My sister was a senior at UMaine Presque Isle when I was a freshman here at UMaine Orono. Both my parents were working in their fields. My mom worked in accounts payable for my hometown school district. My dad's an electrician, so they were both working, and then it came time that they ran into what a lot of families run into with two kids in college at the same time. And it was a lot of stress. I stressed about it, so I can't even imagine how much my parents stressed
Yeah.
about it. But it's definitely something that thankfully we overcame, and with the help of financial aid and the university, definitely we were able to lessen the burden.
You know, when I have some of the experts back up here, we're going to talk about a FAFSA form.
Yep.
And that's a form that somebody has to file to qualify for financial assistance.
Yep.
How was that experience? Did you get through it, you and your
I
family?
got through it. Thankfully, my mom had a couple run-throughs with my sister already
Sure.
being in college, but it's a daunting process, and some can see it as an extreme challenge, but there are a lot of useful links on FAFSA itself, or the University of Maine Financial Aid Office is always very willing to help with any questions when filling out the FAFSA.
One of the things to remember is there have been some legal change or some law changes down in Washington. It's going to make FAFSA compliance a lot easier for people to handle. And
Yep.
I do think people get nervous about it. There's a bunch of people who don't think they're going to qualify, so they never
Yep.
fill it out. But the percentage of people who qualify for some form of financial aid is really quite high in our system. The vast majority of the students spread throughout our system of institutions actually qualify for some level of assistance.
Yeah.
But you got to meet us halfway. You got to fill out the form. You know?
I think a lot of people kind of assume the worst and think that their families either have too high of an income or they won't get as much as they need. But I definitely think it's something that it's worth filling out because there are benefits to it. There's always loans. When I filled out my FAFSA, I was awarded different grants and loans through the federal government. So it's definitely worth it to at least make the effort to fill out because there is a payoff to it.
So you approach graduation and you make a decision about your future. Tell me about that.
Yes, I graduated with my bachelor's degree in accounting in December of 2019. And then I started graduate school here in January, January.
Went
Straight
right
ahead.
it.
Yep, might as well get
Did you
it.
enjoy Christmas in between?
I did.
All right,
Yep.
good.
Took a nice break, had no homework, and then started right up with grad school. I'm in the business administration master's program here. I didn't want to leave UMaine. I have a good community here, and I really had no reason I wanted to leave.
That's great. It's a great story. And what are you going to do? I've heard that maybe you have something going on in a different part of the state once you graduate?
Yep. Upon graduation, I have an internship offer at a top 100 U.S. accounting firm in Portland.
Wow.
So I get to stay within Maine, but also get to follow kind
you
of my
told me you're
goals.
never leaving Maine.
Probably not.
Except for visits or something.
Yeah, every once in a while, but probably not very often.
Okay.
Yep. So I have an internship offer down there upon completion of my MBA in next May.
So I'm going to use you for 1 second.
Yeah.
You're from Maine, you're getting your education in Maine, you intend to stay in Maine.
Yep.
That's the truth of most of our in-state students who come to our institutions. They're part of Maine, they don't want to leave. And what we're doing and trying to do, and I think you helped us do it, is to give back to Maine a great workforce. But I also will use you as an example. We also attract students from other states. You had friends who were from other states.
Yep.
The percentage of those people that we keep in the state as part of the future workforce in Maine is really quite spectacular, and will help us meet these demographic challenges in the state to make sure that we have enough replacement workers someday your mother's going to retire.
Right.
And,
Yep.
someday your dad's going to want to retire. We've got to make sure, someday you're going to retire.
Yeah.
But that's a long time away.
Hopefully, yeah.
But we have to make sure that we're providing that workforce that's
Yep.
necessary for Maine to be successful in the future.
Yep.
And I think you're a big part of our future.
Yep.
So have we served you well?
Absolutely. Yep. 100%. I mean, well enough so that I decided to stay a little bit extra.
Yeah. So would you recommend it?
Absolutely. Yep. The University of Maine, it's coming from a small town. It was a little bit of a shock to my system, but it was a very necessary shock. It's a great school, a great community, and like I said, it kind of opens up to different diversity that the world has that you might not get in small towns in Maine.
So, Michaela Roy, we've run out of time, but I want to congratulate you.
Thank you
and
so
thank
much.
you. And you know what? Just keep this in mind. Your willingness to do this is helping people out there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We're going to go to a break.
Hi, I'm Paige Thibodeau. I'm a sophomore at UMA Bangor in the Vet Tech program, and I am a proud Promise Scholar. So I live in Medford, Maine. We have a family farm and stuff like that, so growing up with animals has been, what I did. And I found out my senior year of high school from my guidance counselor about this Promise initiative. Without them, I wouldn't have had this opportunity. I volunteer once a week at the Humane Society, and honestly, it's my favorite part of my week. If I could do it more, I would. Maine is my home. It's beautiful. My family's here. I've lived here my whole life. It means everything to me.
Hi, I'm Adam Bagley. I'm a sophomore at the University of Maine at Fort Kent, studying business and forestry and also conservation law, and I'm a proud Promise Scholar. I love it because it gives me a chance to be in the outdoors almost every day. Law enforcement and then forestry, it's really rewarding. Being able to do that and not have to worry about paying it off is a huge relief. I'd love to stay in Maine, and that's kind of the goal. Forest rangers, which is what I want to do, there's half the positions are open right now. The average age is like 50 something, so a lot of people are getting ready to retire, and I'd love to step in and kind of show what I can do.
Hi, I'm Dacian Robert. I go to University of Maine at Presque Isle, and my major is Business Administration in Management and Leadership, and I am a proud Promise Scholar. I went to University of Maine Presque Isle for an interview just to look around the campus, and I just fell in love with it. I'm in Student Government Association, Campus Board of Activities, and Business Club. I was very relieved to find out that I was eligible for the Pell Grant. It was just like a big weight off my shoulders knowing that I have a college that accepted me.
Hi, I'm Emma Jones. I am a sophomore at the University of Maine at Machias. I am in the Psychology and Community Studies program, and I'm a proud Promise Scholar. So I'm majoring in the Psychology and Community Studies program. It's really nice being able to focus on my academics and not having to worry about financial stuff, because that was a really big worry for me. I absolutely love Machias. It's a great school. I love their psychology program. The professors are awesome, and it's just a good community.
Of the University of Maine system. I think that was a great first segment. Meet one of our students and have a conversation about her experience. A small town Maine person who came to the University of Maine, our largest university, enjoyed it and stayed a little extra for an additional degree. Right now we're going to segue to how do we help you, the folks who are tuning in and your children. And so I have some experts that we're going to have a bit of a dialogue on, or with, I should say, over the next few minutes. To my left is Connie Smith. She is the Director of Financial Aid here at the University of Maine and a true expert in that area. To my immediate right is Mila Tappan, who is the College Access and Outreach Manager for the Finance Authority of Maine. It's great to be with you, and thank you for what you do. We're going to talk about that FAFSA again, I think.
We are, yes.
And then on my far right is Jonathan Henry, who is the Vice President of Enrollment Management at the University of Maine, Augusta. And so it's great to have all of you here. I think I'm going to go to you, Connie, and say, this must be a very busy time of year for you. The applications have gone out, they've come back, acceptances are out there, and lots of people want to know what's going to happen. How are they going to pay for this education? Walk me through that a little bit.
It's a very busy time of year, Dan. And yes, we have many students who have applied at the University of Maine, and they've done their FAFSAs. We've sent over 10,000 award offers out at this point.
Now, I want to stop you again, because I want folks who are watching to understand how important this FAFSA is. You can't do anything for anybody, just about, unless they fill out that FAFSA.
That's correct. You really do need to fill out the free application for federal student aid, the FAFSA form. That's how most of the need-based financial aid that we give out is given, outside of your admissions-based scholarship. So yes, it's very important.
So more likely than not, because of the how they're watching us today, they have access to a computer, most of the viewers, but we have libraries spread throughout the state. There are ways to get this form filled out, even at a school. Why don't you tell them a little bit about that if you have a second?
Right.
And
so
we're going to come back to you, I can assure.
That sounds great.
You can absolutely, anybody will help you. If you come into my financial aid office, we have staff that will help you through that. I know Mila has staff that they go out on the road, they help families fill out this form. We have an organization called the Maine Association for Financial Aid Administrators. We go out to high schools and we help families fill out the FAFSA form. But at this point, it's not too late. You can absolutely still apply. And we would strongly recommend that you do that if you haven't.
A very high percentage of the students who come to our system, our state system, receive some form of financial aid and assistance. Isn't that correct?
That is correct. They do.
And that goes through your office here at the University of Maine and other offices at all of our universities?
It does. Each of our system campuses have a financial aid office, and the FAFSA information comes to us, and then we go ahead and we process it. We may ask for additional information. If
don't scare anyone.
I won't talk about verification yet.
All right.
But yes, that is something that, it does come through pretty much anything a student receives in regards to financing their college education comes through our office.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Mila, let me turn to you, because this is a big push of your organization to
absolutely.
get a higher percentage of students applying to our institutions or any institution to file this form. Tell me a little bit about your efforts.
Right. So the FAFSA, the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, is something that we want to be sure every single high school senior files. And we want them to do it every single year, ongoing. But currently, only about 51% of our high school seniors have filed a FAFSA. But as Connie said, the good news is it's not too late. Students can certainly still do that. It is the way that they open up access to federal financial aid, state financial aid, and institutional financial aid at most of the colleges here in Maine. They can go to FAFSA.gov to get that done. They can even do it on their phone now. So there's all sorts of ways that they can get that completed. There's lots of help available, lots of free help, never pay for help, lots of free help available. So we want to be sure that they do that. Sometimes we hear that students are concerned because they don't really know what they're doing next year. And I think sometimes people have thought if they do the FAFSA, they're committing to something, but they're not. They're just simply keeping their options open. So we want to be sure if students haven't finalized their plans, they still get that FAFSA filed, and then they will know that they're eligible for some type of aid.
Right. Well, about 93% of the students who come to our system receive some kind of aid or assistance. So it's a very high ratio, and it's important. One of the things that we're trying to convince people of is to fill this form out, access the additional money that might be available to them. It might be a grant, it may be very low interest loan, it may be some other forms of aid, and try to get that education in as short a period of time as you can. One of the great things about doing that is we can actually show you that if you do it in 4 years, you're going to have less debt than if you do it in 5 or 6. So you're an important partner in making sure that we keep people on the right track, that we help them pay for their education. In the Roy family, we helped them fund 2 students at one time in our university. So it was a very important thing to do. We are going to be taking questions, and you can be sending those questions in as we speak. I can't read your mind, so you can send them. Somebody will give them to me, or I'll read them above the camera, and we'll answer those questions in just a few minutes. We do have another expert, Jonathan Henry from the University of Maine, Augusta. What is enrollment management?
Enrollment management is a term that didn't exist when I started in this profession in 1985. It was just born. It's the notion that enrolling a student, attracting, enrolling, and keeping a student through graduation requires a series of activities that are well planned and coordinated to help support a student right through the end. So before we were very sort of siloed. You had admissions and financial aid and registration and student services. Enrollment management tries to look at them holistically and look at all the moving parts and sort of grease the skids, if I can say that, to help move students through and solve problems, which we do every day on a daily basis. And then also plan at a higher level, how can we make it more affordable? How can we leverage the dollars we have to provide more scholarship? How can we get more students, that 49% that aren't filling out the FAFSA, to complete it because they're leaving money on the table? I think you said over $10 million
a year
left on the table. So enrollment management is trying to get the word out.
Wait. I want to say that again. You need to understand that Maine students, by not filling out that form, have left over $10 million a year on the table that they could have accessed and applied to their education. It's an important number.
Absolutely.
And can I just say, that's just in federal Pell Grant money, and that's a grant that doesn't have to be repaid.
Right.
That doesn't even take into account what they could get for the Maine State grant.
You may have already won the lottery, you just haven't filled out the ticket.
So that's enrollment management. It's all this excitement about getting students through. And we know, I've been in Maine 20 years, how important it is to encourage students. We have an opportunity in Maine. About 60% of students pursue a baccalaureate degree or a form of higher education. There's 40% who don't. And if we can get them into the system, it helps folks. You see it in Michaela's family. We can see it in all those stories. We just need to replicate it. It really is about Maine.
Well, you know, that's an important fact that you've just shared with us. You know, Maine has one of the highest high school graduation rates in all 50 states. But we have a lower rate, a substantially lower rate, and moves us down in the rankings with respect to going to college, that rate of students who just don't apply or don't get over the threshold. And I think a lot of that in our state here in Maine is because people don't believe that they can afford it. Or young people think, well, I don't want to burden my family. But that young person may just have it all wrong. They may be in a position to go to one of our universities for practically no money at all if they apply, if they get accepted, and if they fill out that FAFSA form.
That is right. And in fact, you said close to no money at all. 4 of our institutions are participating in the Promise program, a tuition promise program. And that's popping up all over the country. What is it? It's basically a promise that for those who might be Pell Grant eligible, they have a family income that necessitates that they would be eligible for a loan. We make a promise that we will effectively pile together grants and free dollars to make the effective cost of tuition zero. So all of the tuition fees could be covered through the free resources. I wouldn't say it's free because there's room and board, there's books, there's other things, but we say tuition will not be a barrier for your family. And we have had a great success with that here in the University of Maine system in the 4 schools that are participating. But the truth is the others probably have very close to that. So there's this perception of affordability and there's the reality of it. And the reality is thousands are benefiting from it.
And I think that escapes a lot of folks from Maine. That they can't quite wrap their minds around it. So let's say it again. There's a very real chance that your child or yourself, if you're a student, might be able to come to one of our institutions and have your tuition covered in total. But you have to apply, you have to respond if you're admitted, and you have to fill out the FAFSA, and we can help. Again, 93% of our students in our system are receiving some form of support in paying for their education. So I want to thank you for sharing that. Could you just spend a minute and further describe what a Pell Grant is?
Yeah, absolutely. So a Pell Grant is the largest federal grant that's available. It's up over $6,000 for the upcoming year. It might go down a little bit depending on your eligibility, but that's a huge amount of money. And the thing about grants is you do have to fill out the FAFSA, and it's money that does not have to be repaid. So we want to be sure that all students do that. In Maine, we also have the Maine State Grant, which is also a grant that does not have to be repaid. That's $1,500 per year.
We want to keep you in Maine.
Absolutely. And so there are other types of grants available as well. So when you hear grants are good. They are funds that don't have to be repaid. Scholarships are also good, and those don't have to be repaid. And so by doing the FAFSA, it opens up the opportunity to be considered for all of those funds that all of the University of Maine system schools have available.
And then there are student loans. Again, you have to fill out the FAFSA.
Right, you have to fill out the FAFSA, and that's one of the things we'll say to families. If they say, well, you know, we think we make too much money, we don't think it's worth it to fill out a FAFSA, we still want you to fill out your FAFSA. And that's because, first of all, you don't know what you're eligible for unless you apply, but also at a minimum, you're going to be eligible for a federal student loan. And federal student loans are very different than any other loans out there. For one thing, they're not credit-based, so students are going to get them. They used to be called guaranteed student loans. And the repayment terms are so different. They're forgivable in some cases, and they have all of these great options when you go into repayment to really make them affordable. So I'm not like one of these people that wants people to borrow a lot of money, but it can be a means to an end, and these loans are very different from any other types of loans out there.
And we don't want people to get too much debt, and
Nope.
quite frankly, we're kind of specialists at that in a state system.
Right.
The people of Maine support their state university system as well as their community colleges. That support makes our institutions more affordable, and so we can work with you. And I also want to say that the interest rates on those student loans are relatively low compared to other consumer type debt.
They absolutely are. They vary every year, but 4 or 5% is what we've consistently seen. And they have a portion of the loan which for many students means they don't have to no interest is even accruing while they're in school. So when they get out of school, they only owe what they actually borrowed. So that's another thing that really differentiates it from a lot of other types of consumer loans.
So we're getting some questions, and we'll start to take them after our next break. But if you want to send us a question or make a comment, please do, and we'll try to answer that. You know, again, I want to go back to this point that I was trying to make. People are going to time the acquisition of their degree the way that fits best for them. But one of the things that we can sit down and show folks, by accessing just a little more money, they might be able to avoid having to have that part-time job that stretches their education into a 5th or 6th year for a baccalaureate degree. Statistically, if you get your degree in 4 years, it is going to cost you less money, even when you take out the earnings that you might have made on a part-time job during the session. And the difference between 15 credits and 12 credits a semester is a big difference. And so you can help pay for it.
Absolutely. One of the things that's been interesting that I've seen is that sometimes I think students worry about taking 15 credits because they think it might be more than they can handle. But the research has shown that students who take 15 credits actually do better academically than when they take 12.
Right.
Yes.
So not only can they graduate more quickly, but they're probably going to be more successful. So
You know, and we have early results on that. Our Pine Tree State Pledge program at my campus, which requires 30 credits a year, which can include summer. So if people want to take 12 and 3 and 15, they are doing better. They're in more credits, they're going faster, and it's working. And of course, we all know the dividend. We didn't even mention this, is the lifetime earnings of a college graduate. It's well over $1 million more than a high school graduate. So to borrow $10, $20, or $29,000, which is our average, is going to turn into that additional $1 million plus dividend for even just a bachelor's degree.
Maine students coming to our universities have one of the lowest debt ratios in the entire country. That's because of the people of Maine helping to support this system, and quite frankly, because we've gone out of our way to make sure that we are, in fact, affordable to our Maine residents. And there again, you got to fill out that form and let us try to help you.
Can I?
Sure, go ahead, please.
Can I mention there is another deadline that we want them to be aware of?
Go ahead.
So May 1st is the deadline to be considered for the Maine State Grant. So it's definitely not too late to file, but do keep that deadline in mind, because we'd hate to have students miss out on that $1,500.
So $1,500, you have to fill out your FAFSA and be so we can determine whether you're eligible, and then we're basically we'll come to your house and give you a check. No, it'll probably be paid, but to the universities that you choose, private or public, in-state or out-state, there are options for aid and assistance, and it's important that we educate more folks in Maine. We're going to need that replacement workforce in just a few years as people start to retire from the jobs that they currently have. You know, we have one of the lowest unemployment rates in Maine in the whole country, as compared to the whole country. Some people are saying, well, that means I can get a job without going to college. But the point that was just made, you're going to make substantially more money if you have a baccalaureate degree or higher. $1 million. You're going to be healthier. Statistically, people with a baccalaureate degree are healthier. They actually live longer. They're more likely to own a house, and most importantly, they're more likely to see their own children receive a degree in the future. These are important investments that we want you to make, but we want to help you make that, and that's why we're going to take your questions and talk about the things that we need to help you get done. Starts with FAFSA, starts with an application to college and a decision to apply, but we can make major progress. Are you going to be ready to take questions?
Absolutely.
You're going to be ready to take
Absolutely.
questions yourself?
Absolutely.
I think that's it. Let's take a break, and then we'll be back.
It's about your education and the adventure that lies ahead. It's knowing that the opportunity to forge a path is here at Maine's public universities, where $400 million is invested annually to ensure that all Maine residents have access to an affordable, world-class education. And it's about our commitment to offer 280 accredited degree programs across 7 campuses, because in the end, Maine values you. Apply today at values.maine.edu.
Our mission is to give the best possible education at the lowest possible price to make sure that our students are successful and our state is successful.
We have access to thousands of employers because different employers will reach out to different campuses. And then if we can share those resources with students, that's a great way.
I grew up in the woods of Maine, attended one of Maine's public universities, graduated with zero debt, and then now have founded a company in the heart of the old port. It's my dream.
We're back, and I'm happy to say that Michaela, that wonderful student, now a grad student, has joined us and can help us answer some of the questions. You filled out your FAFSA.
I did multiple times.
And it wasn't that hard.
Wasn't too bad. It was definitely worth it.
And it made
paid
a
off.
difference.
Absolutely, without a doubt.
All right, well that's good news. We have a series of questions, and one of the questions is, what happens when you file a FAFSA? How long does it take to understand whether you might get a grant or not? Do you want to take this one?
Sure. So basically, after you hit the submit button on your FAFSA form.
Wait a minute. After you hit the actual button that
there is
says
a button
submit,
that says submit.
and then what happens?
Then what happens is the Federal Processing Center goes through and processes your FAFSA, but I'm going to back that up just a little bit. After you hit submit, you get a confirmation page, and on that confirmation page, it tells you if you're eligible for a Pell Grant or not.
Wait a minute, the federal government is capable of answering a question like that?
They are. They
Wow.
absolutely are. And they will also give you what we call an expected family contribution, or an EFC. And that's what we use in the financial aid office to determine a student's financial need. So those are two things that students would find out as soon as they hit the submit button.
And so the importance of that number is you'll know what your tuition is if you're going to commute. You'll know what your tuition, room and board, and that sort of thing, or at least you can figure that out
Yes.
fairly easily. And that form will tell you what we expect, what the federal government expects your family to contribute.
Correct.
Now that could be almost nothing.
It could be zero.
And it could be a little bit higher depending on your financial
Correct.
circumstances.
Correct.
And that's the number you need to know for you to reach out and help close that gap.
It's really the main reason you fill out the FAFSA form, is so that financial aid offices around the nation can figure out what your financial need is and offer you a financial aid offer.
So on the enrollment side, how important is that?
That is
information.
extremely important for two reasons. Because we want to fill that gap, but particularly in a Promise program, if a student's EFC, say, is $3,000 or $4,000, they'll be getting Pell Grant, but they might need other resources. They probably could get merit scholarship from us. We might fill it with an additional work-study job on the campus, and then for a Promise program, we're going to fill that gap with what we call the last dollar to make sure that a tuition is effectively zero for those Promise Scholar students. So the Pell Grant eligibility being, that tells you right away, you can have a zero tuition program.
I mean, that's pretty amazing. Some number of people who are watching this, either for their own decision making or for their children this year or in the future, the number of people who come to our institutions, and it costs them nothing with respect with respect to tuition is really quite remarkable.
Our Pell eligibility in my institution is 71%.
71%.
More than 2/3.
Don't have to contribute to the tuition payment. That's pretty remarkable. It all begins with the FAFSA form, So what do you? Well, actually, let me go to another question if it's okay. Some people want to know how do they apply for a scholarship, and maybe you can explain that a little bit further. Anybody?
Oh, there's so many different ways. There are really a couple types of scholarships. There are ones that are given out at the point of admission. They're merit scholarships, typically based on a talent or a special category that the university is trying to attract. And that will typically come in the admissions letter or shortly thereafter, or even, as I learned today from a student I worked with from Nepal who's going to an academy down east, she got an email with that information, followed up by the package. So we try to get that information.
Or email.
Yeah, right. She was quite excited to get that email with that scholarship in it. And then that's a merit scholarship. But the financial aid package often will follow later once their paperwork is in and they need to continue their process to assess the student's actual need and what pieces or the financial aid package is put together and sent to the student.
You know, one thing that a lot of people lose sight of is there are a lot of local scholarships that are given out by the Lions Club or other service clubs or churches or organizations. Some of those folks are requiring that FAFSA be filled out as well to consider your application. So that's an important important step.
Those local scholarships, I mean, I'm 100 years old. Or
I
close
got
to
one
it.
of those when I was a kid.
Well, I got over $1,000 in my little high school in southern Vermont, we had 63 in my class, and I walked away with $1,200 on that day in 1981. And that paid for more than half of my tuition where I went that year. And I also had Pell eligibility. That was a long time ago, but the story is still true today. Those local community organizations, the ones available through the university, there are other resources which I think Myla knows more about, and maybe you can jump in there and say, where else can students find scholarships?
Absolutely. So on our website at famemaine.com, we have a scholarship search of Maine-based scholarships. So we want to be sure that all students check those out. There's a great organization in Maine called the Maine Community Foundation, and they have a whole bunch of scholarships that are available as well. And on our page, we're going to have links to other reputable scholarship searches. So we want students to check those out as well. We want to be sure that students are connecting with their school counselors and making sure they're applying for all of those scholarships that are available and offered at high school graduation. But I think it's interesting what you mentioned is that many of those scholarship organizations are now requiring that students file a FAFSA to be considered because they know it's the right thing for students to do and they want them to be able to access all of that aid. So that's just one more incentive for them to file that FAFSA. And if they need proof that they filed their FAFSA, students go right back to where they filed originally, FAFSA.gov, and they can print off documentation that they filed their FAFSA.
Michaela, some of the resistance to FAFSA comes from parents because they get nervous about the form or what information do they have to provide. But your parents got through it.
Yep, my parents got through it multiple times, enough to put 2 kids through college. And also, if parents aren't always ready to help their students fill out the FAFSA, I know from working in the financial aid office, there are always professionals there willing to help students, ready to pull students aside and help them fill it out.
That's that graduate job you have.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, and then tell me, I want to ask, and this is a bit of a personal question, but what does it mean to you to have substantially less debt than you would have had if you hadn't taken the step of FAFSA, if you'd taken on more debt yourself because you hadn't filled out that form? How do you feel about having that low level of debt when you leave with a graduate degree?
Yeah. It's very calming. Not only when I was going through college, my parents had to make very low contribution out of their pockets to my education because of FAFSA and different scholarships, and to know that I'm not going to be 30 years out of college graduation still paying off of my debt just because I took those steps to get either federal help or help through university scholarships. I have manageable debt, and I'll be able to pay it off.
Well, you know, I think Maine is trying to treat its citizens, young citizens, the best it can, and the system that they have built in the University of Maine system, and the amount of money that is contributed to try to keep tuition as low as possible is really quite remarkable, and we should be proud of it. That's a big part of, I guess, what you spent some time talking about as well.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. The other thing I was going to say about scholarships is, as Myla was saying, you want to go to reputable scholarship sites because there are some scholarship sites out there that do prey off students. And if anybody asks you to pay any type of fee, do not do it. It's not reputable.
Right.
And then also many of the colleges themselves, I know with our system schools, we have websites ourselves that put out scholarships, that we have generous donors that do supply our students with scholarships. So those are out there for students to apply for as well. And I think, Michaela, that was something that you encountered when you were here.
Yep. Right at, again, the financial aid office, there are selective scholarship applications. Filling those out, it kind of just puts you in a pool. There are several donors that donate, either depending on financial situation, major, on various criteria, and by filling out the application, students are allowed to be awarded.
So we have another question that's been submitted, and it really is from a parent who's wondering, well, you've said that people can talk to you. Can a parent talk to you if they have a high school senior or even somebody who might be coming to us in a year or two? Is there someone they can talk to?
Absolutely. In our office, we have financial aid advisors that meet with students and families on a one-to-one, very private situation, and parents can talk to us about their student situation all the way up until a student is actually a student. And then there's some new rules that come along with that. So once a student's admitted and they are coming and they're here, then students have to sign a consent form so that their parents can then talk to us. That's a really important thing. I know, you know.
That doesn't mean the parent can get into their email address.
No,
okay.
no. It just means that we can, because, you know, obviously parents are concerned because they're paying the bill and that sort of thing. So we have a way for students to give parents permission to do that.
Well, another question is, what happens to that FAFSA information? Does that become a public record? Can somebody get their information, their social security numbers or other things off of that form?
No, no. What happens is when a student fills out a FAFSA form, they list the schools that they want that information to go to, and it goes directly to the financial aid office, and that's the only place it goes to, and we do not release that information to anyone.
Okay, that's helpful. And then another question, maybe I'll turn to Jonathan. You mentioned this, but we have a question. Are there employment opportunities on a campus that somehow link to making school more affordable?
Yeah, when I think of jobs, I think of two types on campus. There's what we would call work-study positions. That federal work-study program is one of those elements that you can get awarded as a student and have the opportunity to work on campus in an office, athletics, somewhere you wish, the dining hall. And then what we might call non-work study or departmentally funded jobs, where you might be able to work on campus, but you don't have to be eligible for work study, or you might not be eligible. And so both are available typically on most of our campuses, and we rely on student employment. Students are an integral part of our campus. And let me put on my enrollment management hat. We well know that sometimes the most caring adult that a student may connect with first is not a faculty member. They certainly are there, but it may be somebody that they're working with, that they've met at a job fair, they're going to get hired in an office. So they often make great connections with student employment on campus. It only amplifies that academic experience of having a faculty mentor and perhaps a supervisor in an office where they're learning from somebody who's caring, who's worked with dozens of students before them, and they're earning while they're learning.
Right, great. So we have another question, and I think we've touched on it, but I think we need to clarify the answer to this. People are wondering whether you have to fill out a FAFSA every year, and the answer to that is yes. But it gets, by practice, gets a lot easier, I guess, in years 2, 3, 4, and beyond. Is that correct?
Well, for a matter of fact, it really gets easier because after you do it the first year, you can do a renewal the second year. So when you go back into FAFSA.gov, you go to the same place and you log in, then what you're going to see is almost everything is completed and just needs to be updated. And then the financial section, of course, completely needs to be updated because it's going to be a new year's worth of data. So what might have taken maybe 30 minutes to do the first year is probably going to take 15, 20 minutes at most that second year. And there's a really cool tool that I don't know if it existed when Michaela was in school, when her sister, was it your sister,
Way back when.
Yes. But
all the way to last December.
But when you have parents that have multiple kids in school, when they get to that confirmation page, if they've done their older student first, they can click on a link and it will automatically put all the parent information in and populate a second FAFSA for the younger student.
Wow.
So the point being is that the FAFSA has gotten so much easier over the years. And I think sometimes people think it's going to be difficult, but first of all, it's really not that difficult. And if they do need help, there's so much free help available. We've got a whole page on our FAME website, famemaine.com, dedicated to the FAFSA filing. So
Now, somebody was listening very well when we were speaking earlier, and they wanted to know, because you made a reference to it, what additional information might be required in this process?
Okay, well, there's a process called verification. So when you fill out your FAFSA form, schools are asked to quite simply verify the information that you've put on your FAFSA form. And it's a random selection. And it's very random, but there's some method to the madness, I believe. About 30% of our students get selected. And when you are selected for verification, the financial aid office will send you a letter telling you exactly what we need. And usually it's verifying household information, untaxed income, things like that. Many people get tripped up in this particular piece of the process. So they finish their FAFSA, they're selected for this process called verification, and that's kind of where things stop. And so I know Mila and I've talked about this a lot over the last couple of years, is we have something called, verification melt. So people, will just they're scared to do it. But we have lots of resources that we can help you out, finishing that. And we've tried to make that simpler, but it can be a little overbearing.
Now, in some recent federal legislation that was passed, there are going to be direct services that are available to help on this, and direct contact between government agencies, just to make sure that perhaps in the future there'll be a lower percentage of folks who will be required to answer those questions.
That's what we're hoping for.
Yeah. Well, that's what the legislation says.
Yep.
And so a lot of this will just be a lot more automatic. That will start, I guess, in the next batch of applications when we're back around a semester or a year from now. Do you have any words of advice? As a very experienced graduate?
My biggest pieces of advice would be it's a very intimidating process. It's intimidating to everyone, but don't be scared of it. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And everyone that works at the university is there to help. The financial aid office is there to help, and they're more than happy to.
Is everybody there as nice as you?
I mean, I might even be one of the meanest ones.
Oh, wow. That's really nice, huh?
It's all sunshine and rainbows in Wingate.
We have a question that's just come in, and I'm not sure I understand it, but we're going to try to answer it. Is there a way to lower your expenses? Well, that's kind of what we're talking about, but any other thoughts?
Well, my institution is mostly commuter. We have a few residential students, but that is one way for families that are really worried about the additional expense of living in a residence hall. There are some that commuting from home is certainly an option, and I think students commute from home at all 7 of our universities.
Sure.
So that's one way to curb expenses for sure. The part-time jobs on or off campus is another, and I think, Mila, you had a term you're using.
Yeah, I really like families to think about paying for college as being a piecemeal approach. So I like to think about pie, my favorite dessert, right? And the more pieces of pie that you have, the easier it is to pay for college. So you want to get your expenses down as low as possible. Really think about your living situation, how you can eliminate anything that you don't need to be doing. But once you've got that bill, think about what your aid is. So your need-based aid that comes as a result of filing your FAFSA, maybe your merit-based aid. But then think about things like some families do have some savings, and then sometimes there are tuition payment plans that can just spread out that remaining balance or even a portion of it over a period of time. It just makes it a little bit easier. We can talk about summer earnings. We can talk about maybe even some graduation money, part-time earnings during the academic year. Loans might be a piece of it as well. But then when you get 6 or 8 pieces to that pie, no one piece has to be as large. And I think that's when college starts to feel like it's more affordable for families.
Well, I'm hungry now.
Well, yes, me too. We haven't had dinner, have we?
That is a Maine native blueberry pie.
I'm from Washington County.
All right, I just wanted to I wanted to make sure that we're paying attention here. As a parent of 3 graduates, there are other practical things that you can do. And instead of waiting till the last week before your children are going to school, and you end up buying more things than they're actually going to need, particularly you might spread that out and have a more planned involvement. You can go to a Target store 2 days before schools are open, and they're crowded with people. And quite frankly, those aren't the best, lowest prices you're going to get of that season. If you had gotten there 2 weeks earlier. And quite frankly, don't spend as much money for those sorts of things. In all likelihood, the amount of wasted money on that freshmen moving in or supplies just don't make a lot of sense. There are also a number of programs, including lower priced for computers and personal computers and iPads that are available once you're accepted and registered in school. And so many parents and students go out and buy these things before they understand what money they could save. The reality is in Maine, your education in our system can be a lot less expensive than it would be at other universities, state universities in other states. Even if you got their in-state tuition, it's probably going to be lower here in Maine. You're closer to home. You have a higher ratio of teachers and professors with PhDs and people who have great track records of teaching. So we really do want to make this as affordable, as close to home, as great an education as we can give to the people of Maine. That's what we're all in trying to do, and we have proof. We brought Exhibit A over here. Any final thoughts that you have on
I'm thinking back to my own experience again, which was 30-some years ago, about one way to lower expenses is to prepare for them before they hit you, which is summer savings. You know, getting the job and really squirreling away the money, which was always a challenge for me in rural Vermont when I was growing up. But you know, finding a way to shave those textbook costs by used textbooks or rentals or e-textbooks, and all of our university bookstores provide those options, or getting them through like an Amazon. There's many different ways, but I think it's really finding a way before you get there, because you can run out of money in September, October pretty quickly if you're not ready to use that summer. Those days of a student able to work in the summer and save every penny, you know, by working at the mill, those are gone, but you can do your job by getting ready, so when you launch that big first semester, you've got a little bit in the bank to carry you through that first semester.
FAFSA, maybe a summer job. What
Absolutely.
do you think?
Well, I would add on to that. I love that point, John, is that you've got to have the conversation with your kids, parents and students talking to each other kind of about expectations and who's going to do what. You know, as the mother of two college students, one who's through and one who's still in there, you know, I remember having that conversation about what the expectations were and having to have the conversation maybe more than once. You know, just being clear about who can cover what, and I think that's a great way.
And not the summer before you go.
Right, exactly, long before that. But I think that those summer earnings really can make a difference. And of course, we love to have families start saving. One of the myths that's always out there is that sometimes people think saving's going to hurt their financial aid eligibility, and the reality is that it's not going to. Typically, for most families, it's going to have no impact at all. Maybe for some families, it'll have a little bit, but having that option available is huge. So we hope that families that have younger kids maybe will think about that as well.
Good advice.
Thoughts?
Well, I would definitely, you know, say many of the same things both John and Mila said. But, you know, for me, I think, you know, I've been in this business for 25 years. I've talked with so many families. I put 2 kids through college myself. So I get it. I know it can be a little daunting at times. But I think the most important thing is it is having that plan. I've talked with many folks who have come here first day of classes and hadn't filed a FAFSA, hadn't, you know, done whatever it was they needed to do. So just, you know, start thinking about it now. Talk with us. There are lots of resources. If I can say one thing, there are lots of resources. And the other thing I want to say is for families that might have a special circumstance, or maybe a job loss or high medical bills, anything like that, really important to talk with your financial aid office, because we can reassess your FAFSA information based on your current circumstances. So that's what I would say at this point.
And remember, you know, the vast majority of people who fill out that FAFSA from Maine are going to get a Pell Grant. I mean, that's
about
what's
50%.
About 50%, and you know, it's quite amazing, and then be eligible for additional state assistance.
Right,
so
exactly.
it can be very substantial very quickly. Now, you take some of these calls from people who are worried about this,
Yes,
right? Tell me about that experience.
I haven't fully started with the calls. I have witnessed a lot of in-person conversations. They can become heated. Finances are a very touchy subject, and it's very serious and very stressful. But when people aren't afraid to ask questions, aren't afraid to reach out to the resources on campus, we find that, I mean, they usually have better outcomes. If you're willing to put the work into it and put the effort into it, you will definitely see a return out of it.
Well, that's great. So let me just say thank you for taking the time, spending it with me. You know, this is part of a program. We're going to have other speakers week after week after week. We're going to communicate that with you. I know the president of the University of Maine will be at least one of the presenters next week. I think if you bear with us. If you tune into these, you're going to be a more educated consumer and understand the value of not only a baccalaureate degree, but a baccalaureate degree from one of the 7 universities in the University of Maine system, to a great student, to a professional and financial aid, to a great ally and an enrollment specialist. This has been fun to do. I hope we're helping you and your family out, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.